Welcome to Solve. This is a SaaS Ops live virtual event where we, SaaS Ops professionals, get together on a Friday afternoon and discuss everything SaaS. And I'd like to welcome you all to a new segment that we have, which is Ask a SaaS CEO Anything. Obviously, today we have a SaaS CEO and we're going to ask them anything. And for our first guest, we have David Politis from BetterCloud, an incredibly experienced person in all things SaaS. So David, thank you for taking time out in your busy afternoons and your day and joining us all here.
Thank you, Colin. I'm very excited to be here. I'm happy to be the first CEO in the hot seat.
Yeah, I think some would probably think of you as the father of SaaS and SaaSOps and what we're very interested in and what our daily lives revolve around. I know all of my colleagues have burning questions, and I'm glad to see a few people have just turned up. I'm glad to see those faces. I want to ask one question. When you started BetterCloud, did you think it would be where it is now?
The truth is that, so we started BetterCloud, I started 10 years ago. And the truth is that I don't think there's any way I could have imagined that we would be where we are today. I mean, frankly, when we started the company, people would ask me as I was fundraising, hey, what's the $1 billion idea? What makes this a $1 billion company? All these questions. And to be honest, I didn't have answers back then. And I think it's because the world looked very, very, very different back then. And as you all know very well, it was not the same world as it relates to SaaS back then as it is today. And so the SaaS adoption that has occurred in the world is frankly the wave that we've been riding, and that has put us where we are today. But no, I could not imagine. You mentioned, we talked before, is like we just came off our company summit that we did, and the company is now almost 400 people, and it is the thing I'm most proud about. Really, is the team and the team we built, and so yeah, I don't think I could have imagined that.
And would you think that the last couple of years have really accelerated or changed SaaS and SaaSOps?
The last couple of years was definitely the tipping point, but this even started in 2017. I feel like that felt to me like things really changed. I mean, think about when we started BetterCloud, really the average number of SaaS apps in an environment, literally, I mean, I think we all know 1, 2, 3, maybe 2015, 5, 6. To think today we're in the hundreds. Could someone actually believe that there was going to be 200 individual vendors in an environment? I don't think, I think that if someone said yes to that, I have not read anything from 10, 15 years ago that even predicted where we are today. So I think it started in the 2016, 17 type of range, but it became very real, obviously. Not just real, but there really became no turning back once we moved to this more distributed work globally.
Right, yeah. I'm going to open it up to questions. Come off mute, ask away.
I've got one that's sort of related to what you asked, Colin. David, what were you doing right before you started BetterCloud? And can you talk about what made you decide I'm going to go this way?
So what made me decide, I'll give you the background, but what made me decide is my whole life, all I've wanted to do is be an entrepreneur. It's it's been my dream since I was looking through this old box of stuff, and I have this book that I read, I think I wrote in third grade or something, some story, and it was all about me being an entrepreneur. It's literally been my entire life. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to drop out of college to start a company. I finished college, but I wanted to drop out. I didn't do very well in college, probably because I was thinking about this the whole time. And so always this has been my dream. But I always thought, because I was around my father's businesses, and my father's businesses were were smaller businesses, probably 5-10 people maximum. And so I grew up around that, and I felt like that's the path I was going to take. And then I was at a company right before. So you're quite right before, was a company called Cloud Sherpas. And Cloud Sherpas was this very small, when I arrived, less than 10 people, cloud consulting company. And again, back then, we're talking about 2010, it wasn't called cloud consulting. It was really called, at the time, Google Apps reseller, right? If we think about what it was, because that's what it was back then. And we were the second, I believe, or third ever Google Apps reseller back then. And so I was at Cloud Sherpas, and it was there where I learned about Google Apps, which of course was the precursor to so many of the productivity tools that are out there today. And I learned about that. I learned about how that actually was changing people's work. Like, truly, when I first heard about it, I said, I don't know, what is Google Apps? People, Gmail and work. People use Gmail, and I had no idea. And then you started to experience it with customers. It was this game changing, just culture changing in 2010, really changing the way people were working. And so it was there that I saw this rise, again, specifically of Google, but it was also there that I just became. I learned what I really enjoyed, which for me is the product development. That was a consulting company, and I really enjoy product. I feel like product. I get connected to a product the way you get connected to a child or something. Like, it becomes something you really can see and nurture and grow, and it has its own, I don't know, personality and feel like you. And so that was what happened from Cloud Sherpas. I said, I'm really passionate about this space. I'd been in SaaS even before, and I'm really passionate, but I realized product is where the passion really, really comes from. And so that was how I got started with BetterCloud. And then back to Colin's question, for me, it felt very much, I'm going to start this small product company. I mean, that was really the where we were at the time, and it's been amazing, really, where we've gotten to. But yeah, that's where I was right before. But this has kind of always been my dream, I ask people sometimes, when my interviews, I always ask people, what's your dream job? And when people ask it back to me, I say this, and I mean that sincerely. I don't know. This is what I literally dreamed of, probably third grade. I'd be doing something like this, probably better than what I dreamed of, frankly.
You mentioned,
Brian.
sorry, I was going to say, you mentioned kind of getting attached to products as if they were like children. That can be, it's good because you pour your time and your energy into things, but it can also be, I would imagine, a challenge when you realize that you need a new child or a different child or, a new product. How did you, I wasn't at BetterCloud when we released BCX or when we transitioned from FlashPanel, the old BetterCloud to the new BetterCloud. How did you, and I know what went into it, right? Multi-SaaS, we need a new thing, but how did you get to that point and, like, in your head know that was the right direction to go, and then take that step and get everybody on board with you?
It is a really, to your point about the analogy, it is actually a really difficult thing to look at something and say, this we've spent 5 years, I mean, at the time, 4 years on, and was a really successful product and had gotten the company from nothing to something. And it is really hard to look at that and say, wow, like we need to let's say try for the second child and bring that second product into the world. And the only reason we did it, was I had gone through this at my first company, this cloud PBX business, and we had this exact moment that was exactly the same. I mean, it was literally the exact same, almost in the exact same time frame. Everything was the same. We had a decision point to make about, were we going to keep going and with what we had, or were we going to more than evolve, really revolutionize what we were doing? And we decided not to revolutionize, frankly, because the risk felt too high. We were very attached to what we had in the market, and we just felt like it we shouldn't do it. And that was the biggest mistake that I think I've made. And I didn't know enough at that point. I was probably 4 years out of college. I didn't know enough to to fight and to do what was necessary to make that kind of a bet. And so when we got to that same point with BetterCloud, it was honestly actually a number of people on this solve call who were telling us at the time, you need to go do this. I mean, they may have not said those exact words, you need to go and build a platform, spend $30 million and spend 2 years stressing out and doing like probably not that exact thing. But there was people in this group saying you need this rise of the heterogeneous stack is happening. And it was through those that it was too clear that we needed to do it. And the pattern recognition for me was just very real. I actually remember being 25 years old, 26 years old, and saying to my board, we need to press the big red button and just think about the problem differently. And the reality is we didn't do that. RingCentral did that at that exact same time. And RingCentral is what it is today. I'm not saying we would have been that or not, but they made that type of a bet. APIs, platform, just everything that they did. And so that was the thing where it was just that pattern recognition and that understanding that, wow, we have to listen to what the experts and the people living on the front lines are saying and not be scared. And it is it's not just scary, it is hard because you're really creating this new, this new child, frankly, and it's got its own personality, and it's going to go from crawl to walk to run. And it doesn't just go to running, and that's so it's a really good question. That is exactly the reason why that we did it.
I've got another question, if people don't mind. You were saying about how you listen to the industry and people like us. Obviously now you've got a lot more customers and your staff are hearing from us from a lot of different areas. And obviously you love creating the product. How do you balance what each individual person is requesting from the application, which is niche for their needs, and how do you balance it over the betterment of the company and the majority?
Well, so when we started, I said, we are going to listen to our customers at this company in a way that we have never done before. Or that I had never done before. And as a company, most people hadn't seen before. And so in the early days of BetterCloud, we would do wireframe reviews with customers on every feature we were building. There was a small group, to your point, it was a much smaller group. I mean, we had 20 customers, I don't know, at that time. And so it was a small group that we would talk to, and we would do wireframe reviews. And I was in a lot of those, and people would actually say, no, if you could move the box here and do the thing here and put this in the next sequence. And it was very, very, very specific. I had a conversation at Google I/O that I will never forget with a customer who on a piece of paper drew an entire feature for me, like actually drew the entire thing. And that was the level of detail that we would get into, and not just get into. To be honest, a lot of that showed up in the product. Many people here, again, were in the meeting in 2015 where we showed people this future of BetterCloud, and we asked for that type, literally that pixel by pixel type of feedback. How we've evolved, and I think maybe how I've matured and how as a company we've matured, is now when we talk to people, we really are trying to talk to people about the problems that they're trying to solve. We've become much more outcome oriented or problem statement oriented versus feature, like please put this button here or do this or make it so that when I click that's literally what it was before. And now it's much more trying to understand what are the problems that people face specifically, but the problem, what are they trying to achieve? What would they like this to do for them at the end? And then solve those problems. When you do it that way, the thing you learn is that the alignment is much tighter between the customers. I mean, we have 2,000 customers now, and the alignment is much tighter than it was with 20. Because with the 20 customers, everyone had their opinions or their design, feelings, or now it is everyone does really have the same problem or general like outcomes that they want to achieve, not the exact same, but you know what I'm saying. And so what we've tried to do is understand who's that right customer for us. What is the problem that they're trying to solve? I mean, one of the big things that we've done as an example is understanding who that customer has become much more narrow too. When we were doing it back in the early days, we would talk to the head of security, and at the same time, the next call, and I'm not making this up, was the office manager of the company, because we were selling to the 50-person company. And so now this group, the heads of IT, those are the people who we speak to and listen to, and so that's how we've done it. I think we've matured quite well in that regard, and it makes it much easier to understand if we're actually achieving what we set out to achieve, versus did we build a good looking product that someone could click through, versus did we actually help them solve the problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah, the one thing that we've always come across about, it's brilliant in these discussions and other discussions, we all have the same problem regardless of industry, regardless of regulations that we're under, regardless of size. There are obviously some nuances, but the base level problems are the same.
Exactly.
So I'm really interested.
Sorry, I'll throw out a really softball one here. It's a really quick one. So do you still have to do IT support for your family?
The answer is yes, and probably I feel like forever, or maybe until my kids are my kids are getting probably better. My oldest one is 8. He's starting to, I think, progress faster, than I am. But yes, otherwise I do all IT support, including I do a lot of remote hands. My parents live in Israel. I do remote hands there. I do, on site for my in-laws in their house in New Jersey. I love it. But yes, I am definitely in charge of IT for the whole family, including the growing from anyone in any growing, part. I have text threads with friends who are asking me to help them with stuff. It's, so yes.
So I was going to ask, you're saying like that you're doing a lot of selling to like heads of IT. And I was thinking about that, and also then that sort of growth from SaaS of being like 1 app to 5 app to 200 apps. And so I was trying to get a sense of like, how do you organize your IT organization? Like, is it sort of functional by business? Is it a platforms team? Do you have sort of a help desk sort of stratification? And what are you also seeing in terms of the industry? Like what are the shifts that you're seeing there in terms of the way that people organize IT, and then where SaaSOps sits within that?
I believe that everyone knows, you have to, Gartner is a very important piece of the puzzle, in terms of people's strategies, especially as you get into the enterprises. And Gartner for a long time had when they would show an IT org, it would be this very siloed type of org when they would show the org chart. And if you look at what Gartner is saying themselves, and I use that only because Gartner is usually a couple of years behind the curve. If you look at what Gartner is saying now, they're saying that those silos are getting broken down and there's this centralization happening of SaaS ownership. I believe that the ownership of the core SaaS apps, I'm going to be careful not to say all the SaaS apps, but the ownership of the core SaaS applications is just the silos will continue to break down, and there will be a center of excellence there. There will be in many companies, there already is, and there will be in many more companies as we go forward, this center of excellence of this is the group that is responsible for SaaS. Because you start to get into this area where, let's say you go to a very large, 200, 300,000 person bank, and there's this group that does email and this group that does collaboration and this group that does, the truth is, what's the line? I mean, what is the line now with these applications? There is no line. And so to me, this center of excellence is starting to take shape. And I see that in our customers for sure. That has happened I'd say for pretty much all of our customers. But as we talk to bigger and larger organizations, we're seeing them think about that. I spoke to a very large global bank, and they just put their first person in charge of SaaS ops across the bank. And they are such a big bank that, of course, that person is more of the overlay, if you will. They have the center of excellence. They still have to go and influence all the different groups. So, it's going to take them years. But I believe that that's what's happening. I'll say that at BetterCloud, our view is actually even more about this centralization and bringing together a real business technology group. And so when you think about how we structure our team, we are trying to bring as much ownership as we can under one roof of business technology, which of course has different pieces. I mean, there's going to be the Salesforce group, and there's going to be the help desk group, and there's going to be the automations group, and there are of course going to be these different groups, but it's this mindset for us that this central area of business technology, again, where are the lines? They're all very blurred, and all these things need to start working together in order to really be a competitive advantage for companies. And so I feel like that's kind of where things are going. Now, at the same time, at BetterCloud, we have operations groups for marketing and for sales but they are not the administrators of these applications. They're not the ones responsible for the security of these applications. They're not responsible. When that decentralization happens, I believe that there's a lot of risk that, forget productivity now for a minute, just the actual risk that lives with some of the sensitive data in these applications. When you decentralize too much, which I know people talk about, but when you decentralize too much, standardizing that security posture, that risk, that is just really, at least what I've seen, it usually doesn't work, right? And we have a company, large organization, and when we started working with them, they said, no, we don't own Salesforce. Actually, the sales team owns Salesforce. It was a big company, and after we helped them with looking their environment, we found out that every user in Salesforce, and I'm not exaggerating this, every user was a super administrator. Every user, every rep, every ADR, everyone was a super admin, because not that sales ops was not, they just didn't know how to create the permissioning, and they literally just gave everyone admin. And so that type of thing, same organization said, actually, we don't own it, Slack, that's owned by engineering. And they said, we want to own it, but engineering says they don't want the oversight. And I understand the cultural kind of implications of that. Well, they had 200 engineers who had left, or 250 engineers who had left the company, who were still in Slack chatting their former colleagues in the Slack. And it's not that they were, it wasn't like the engineering leadership was malicious, but I'm not sure that the VP of engineering was thinking about their Slack environment and how they need to create the roles. And so I really believe there's this center of excellence that has been formed, that will continue to get formed inside of organizations. And of course, there still is help desk. And of course, there's still going to be, the very specialized around Salesforce. There's still going to be that. But I believe that these groups are really these SaaS ops groups that, of course, have all these subdivisions underneath them. But those silos are going away. They have to go away. I just don't know how you keep then you're just fighting about who owns what all the time. And
I've got just a quick follow-up, and then I think Rose has got something. But so then how do you then position that with the other executives across the business? Because the CMO is going to have to essentially cede some control to an IT organization, or the chief salesperson. And so how do you have that conversation with those at that exec level to share those concerns with folks?
I believe that let's start with the CEO for a minute. If you go to the CEO of the company and you say, I am going to deliver to you a service, right? This is software as a service, and us, the IT organization, are going to deliver this service that is going to be running well, that we're going to make sure that we're training your employees when things are going to come out, that we're going to, here's essentially our list of I don't want to call it an SLA, but let's call it an SLA for a minute. Here's essentially what I'm delivering to you with this service. And that's what you can count on from me. Why does that matter to you, CEO? It's because now the team's going to be more productive on day one when they arrive at the company. When the new features come out, they're going to actually know how to use them or not use them. We're going to make sure that from a compliance perspective, because trust me, every CEO, even if you don't think it, they are very concerned about. They are, because that will derail everything. And so all of those things, like that's what you're going to get from IT, and giving us the people, the resources, the air cover with the other leaders. And I think that as long as there's that, like, let me be specific, a Marketo. If you said to our head of marketing, we're going to take Marketo and we're going to give it to the IT team and they're going to run Marketo and they're going to do everything and no one in marketing can touch Marketo, that is completely, of course, not going to work, because they need to run their campaigns. But if you say we are going to be responsible for the licensing of Marketo, the permissioning and all of those things, and you're going to use us as the service to that, you can't. Why would you say no to? I mean, you know, if you're actually thinking about the company success, which again, maybe not every executive in the world does, but I would say hopefully most do, at least good ones, they should respond to that and say, wow, really? You're going to deliver it like that? And I don't have to worry about that. And I don't have to think about that. And that gives me more time for my marketing ops person to do that. I'm all in. I think it is how that's presented as, here's how it is when you do it. Here's how it is when we do it. And the actual business piece of it is only going to get better. We're not trying to take something away. We're actually trying to give more to you.
I just had a follow-up on this conversation. Obviously, David, you have had a lot of insight into how other organizations work, both like the IT organization and the organization as a whole. I'm curious how that informed you developing BetterCloud as an organization at various pivotal points, starting at the growth stage, pivoting to remote during the pandemic. Like, how did you use the information that you have from all your customers?
Yeah, that's a good, someone asked me, when we were doing our summit, I was presenting on this one of the topics, and I was talking about this business book that I've read, and afterwards people always ask me, like, what business books do you read and what, tells you how to do this? And I am definitely much more of a learner through experience and through input from, to your point, people who have done it and other companies and other leaders. And so for me, I'm part of a couple of these different roundtable types of, they're like networking groups like this, but they're kind of these different groups where I go to these meetings, and it's 15 people of a similar size company, similar situation, and everyone's just sharing. And I'm always surprised every time I show up, even though we have our own communities of this inside of BetterCloud, I'm always surprised how open people are and how giving people are with information. And it's so I sat with a bunch of CEOs. Actually, we just did this group recently, and we sat and everyone just shared, what are we going to do about going back to the office? And this was in kind of November timeframe. And it was, what are we going to do about going back to work from the office? And there was 12 CEOs on there, and they're all about the same size companies all over the world in that case. And people were sharing their experiences. And it was so interesting, because it wasn't that everyone had the same answer, but after I heard 4 or 5 people share theirs, it kind of in my mind just clicked, like, okay, I've heard what others are doing, and it does definitely influence what we do, but the BetterCloud way to do this is blah, if that makes sense. And so that's like a lot of what I do is just a lot of listening. I mean, in the beginning of COVID, I mean, we did this amazing Better IT roundtable discussion that was, I mean, that was early, right? I mean, that must have been like that early March, that middle March timeframe. And I was just listening to what everyone was saying. Like, this is how we're doing the laptops. This is how we're handling this. This is what we're doing for our employees. I think it was someone either in that or something that came up after that said, oh, we've given a stipend to our employees to buy equipment now for their home offices because they didn't have home offices. We weren't doing that at BetterCloud. And then I heard that in one of those Better IT roundtables. I said, we're doing that. And then we added the stipend. So it's really to me, it's taking all these inputs from different people and then really having, I say the BetterCloud way, but this overarching values and kind of way of doing business that and my own gut that drives the decision making, but we take the inputs from all these places. So that's what I would say. I don't do too much reading on these things. I do mostly talking to people and understanding how they do it. And it's important to have that filter. I think when I was a first-time CEO very early in my career without any experience, if someone told me something, they said, oh, the way to do blah is blah. I would say, okay, well, they've been successful 5 times before. I'm just going to do it exactly that way. And then you start learning that that's not actually the right way to do that. So you have to have your own decisions and you have to make your own decisions based on what's right for you, your culture, all of that. So that's how I do it.
So I have a question in terms of, like you said, you take a lot of input from folks and you've been around. So this may be a softball like question, but what's the best piece of advice that 1, that you've given and 2, that you have received?
Ooh. Oh, wow. Let me think about that one. It's not as softball as you may think it is. Probably the best piece of advice I ever received. And this was a interesting one to get. This was about probably, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe 5 years ago. And one of my board members said to me, Dave, you don't get a medal for essentially sacrificing yourself for by doing all the jobs that exist at the company. Because there was a point in time at BetterCloud where I was the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of customer support, the head meaning we didn't have a VP or a senior level person. And I was that for pretty much anything other than engineering. And I felt like I'm being the hero. I'm making sure that our costs stay low. I'm making sure that, I have my hand in all the different areas of the business. And I was doing it from this mindset of like, this is the right thing to do. And frankly, that was this point where we were getting bigger than any company I'd ever been part of. And the investor said, Dave, you need to bring a group of people around you that are more experts, in these different areas than you are, and that are going to take you to that next level. And this is the best part, that can see around the corner, because you clearly, not by your own fault or anything, you just don't know what a 400-person company and an 800-person company, and you need the people who can see around those corners. And that was a really hard piece of advice. And I'm like, no, I'm in it. I'm doing it. I can do it. And we are where we are because of that. And it was actually the same guy. I said that to him. I said, I think we're where we are because I was doing all the jobs. And he said, well, you may be where you are today because you're doing all of that. You will not get to where you want to get tomorrow because you're doing all of that. And I said, that's really good. That is really, really good advice. And since then, and for anyone who's been close to the company has seen that we have done exactly that. And it takes a long time and to trust people and to find the right people. And not always the first person is the right person, but we have been able to bring in a team finally that is exactly that I can look at it and say, better than me. You know how to see around the corners. I'm going to be here to support you, to make sure you fit culturally, to make sure that you're advancing in the way that we want to advance. But so that was the best advice and probably the biggest game changer for me in terms of the success of BetterCloud. And I think the best advice that I've given people is, I think, and I've had some people tell me this, is to trust your gut. I think if I go back to earlier in my career, there's always this imposter syndrome. I think we all have it at different times, frankly, probably always, for me and for maybe others, but there's always this imposter syndrome of, do I know what I'm doing? Am I the right person to do it? Do I have that, am I at the right level? All of those things. And I think that what you find is for many people, they end up spending so much time. Like, should I make this? Oh, maybe I shouldn't make this. Maybe I should. And the gut, over a period of time, your gut feel maybe it's correct 90% of the time, but it's better, frankly, to be correct 90% of the time and move than it is to be correct 100% of the time and do crazy analysis all the time. And like, there's something about that action and movement and trusting your gut. And I think for people, especially people earlier in their career or people in new roles that they feel are kind of punching above their weight, I feel like for that group, that advice helps people, sometimes get over that imposter syndrome or just remember that, because everyone has it. We all in some way have it. And so that's what I would say.
Hey, David, question for you. How do you find your pricing model when dealing with large organizations like Amazon, Google's of the world, that their incomes are being supplemented by many different things where they can take losses to get ahead somewhere? When you're competing, and maybe not competing completely, but competing price-wise, trying to convince IT people is like, okay, for $20 a user, we're able to get this with Google or this with Amazon. How do you guys find trying to structure your pricing? And obviously, software as a service is a recurring revenue. So any organization that has a recurring revenue, it helps the bottom line. It's guaranteed income kind of thing. But how do you guys deal with that? And how do you guys decide your pricing?
Great. I love that question. I love that question because pricing for me is a great example of how probably if I had the right people on the team, I would have made different decisions, on pricing early on. But no, pricing is a really interesting one, because when you start a business like this, and I would say not just BetterCloud, I think really any SaaS company, you look at the costs, you look at how much it costs to run your infrastructure on AWS or GCP or Azure, you look at how much your people cost, you look at all those things and you say, okay, I come up with a pricing model that's, to be honest, usually pretty simple, because it's early and there's not a lot to calculate when you're doing that. And then as time goes on, you start having these challenges where you say, oh man, we need a security team, but they don't generate revenue. They're not salespeople. They're not engineers. They're not, oh, wait, we need that group in accounting to do, we need that. And then this overhead that was before nothing starts to build up. And then you say, man, we have to figure out how we capture that. And then you start saying, oh, that feature we just released costs 10 times more than any feature we've ever released before. But we were pricing everything as if all the features would look like feature A versus, feature F. And so the answer to your question is the pricing and the pricing strategy has evolved a lot since we started. A lot. I mean, I don't even know how to say that. I can't overstate how much it has evolved. And it's evolved because there's all these pieces that start to come into play. And at some point you go to the customer and say, hey, this product that, you were paying before, $1 for, you now have to pay $2 for. And the customer says, what? $2? You were charging me $1 before. And it's like, well, if I want to keep charging you $1, it's not going to be secure, and it probably won't have this feature, and it probably won't have a customer support person who's going to respond to you, and it's probably not going to have. And so the most recent thing that we did with the pricing was we brought in a pricing consultant, which I had never used before, and I never thought I would use. And this group came in and they did interviews with, I don't even know how many customers, and then just IT professionals. They looked at all of our data. It was crazy. They had like 20 people literally looking through everything and doing all this analysis. And they came back and they gave us this very clear view of the world where they said, you're also charging some customers for stuff that they don't even necessarily use or want to use, and you're charging other customers for less than, because we're trying to build this more average type of cost model versus saying, do you want this module? Do you want these integrations? And so we modularize the whole thing, which some people say, oh, that sucks. But now, meaning to customers, oh, that's more complicated. The reality is now we can actually price it for what the customer wants versus we would literally be like, well, we'll give them the whole package, but now because that feature and this thing and this, we would be charging more, And so this modular approach, but the answer to your question is it has evolved a lot over time. And it has been, and to your point, we don't have anything else that we do. This is what we do. And so there isn't subsidizing from, the rich uncle or whatever, they call the ad business for Google, there isn't the subsidizing from there. And there isn't this is something where this is what we do. And this is all we do. And probably all we will do for at least the foreseeable future. And so, yeah, pricing is a really complicated thing that in the beginning, I think we made the right decisions because we didn't know, that's what you do in the beginning. But as time has gone on, we've had to get much, much more professional and mature about that. And I think after this pricing consultant that came in, I think what we delivered back out now is much better.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
There's been some great questions, and it's been great to hear your views on SaaS and some of the history and insight into BetterCloud. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got one, hopefully, last question.
I've got a good follow-up, quick.
But Dominic, what was that?
Yeah, I've got a good follow-up on this.
Okay, you answer it. You ask it. Go away.
What was your scariest signature?
Scariest
signature on a contract. What felt the scariest?
I mean, the hardest person to get,
or you're saying just the scariest signature on a contract? Well, if I knew the future, I would tell you the lease for our office. I think if I knew that at the time, probably wasn't the scariest, but now reflecting, that was terrible. Honestly, we signed that contract in January of 2020 to expand actually both of our Atlanta, New York, and San Francisco, all three of our offices in January and February of 2020. So if you want, now looking back, it's not just, it's sickening, frankly, anyway, that's probably the scariest as it relates to the business. I think if I think about specific product, this is a kind of interesting one, but the first time that we signed a 5-year contract with a customer, that was kind of crazy for me. I had never seen that type of length of for me in my career, I had never seen that type of length. And we have not done many of them, frankly, because of a whole host of reasons that we don't like. We've tried to stay away from those types of lengths. And we had somebody, it was a big government kind of organization and huge deal. And it just, when you think about signing something it's like a lease almost, you think about something that is that long, that's kind of a crazy thing. Our leases for our office space are they're, I think, longer than that. You're just like, wow. I couldn't even look 2 days ahead of myself 8 years ago. And now I'm talking about 5 years from now. Yeah.
Great answer and a great question there, Dominic. That's a good one. Obviously, it's curious to hear about leases, and when you signed it. As I said, it was great to hear about the history and all of the insight. Where do you think, as a last question in the last sort of 5-ish minutes, where do you see SaaSOps going and the changes to work? Hybrid, remote. I'm getting confused by all of the news posts. Work from home is good. Work from home is bad. People want to go back to the office. Nobody wants to go back to the office. Everybody's resigning. There are lots of jobs. It's incredibly confusing. Use all of these different apps. Just use one app. One app can do everything. What do you see happening?
I agree with you on the news articles. They are really I don't know, it's very oscillating, back and forth. We're using the term distributed work. We've used remote, we've used hybrid, and I feel like the word distributed best represents I will say for BetterCloud, and I believe for the world, frankly, what work is going to look like, where it is not that we're remote, because you're remote from what? I don't know if that's going to be the thing anymore. I think you are distributed from each other, and to maybe you have 36 people. For us, for example, we have 40 people in Denver, and we have 100 people in New York, and we have 100 people in Atlanta, and we have 40 people in Austin, and we have. To me, when you look at that, you say we are working in this distributed way, and there has to be a way to bring those groups together. I think geographically, for at some level, and there will be some. I just think human beings need in person. I don't think human beings should be separated from each other in their apartments or their houses forever and never work. Like, there's teamwork, camaraderie, like it happens from being in person to some degree. So I feel like it's going to be a distributed working environment for many people, and that it's going to have some in-person elements, but the idea of going to an office 5 days a week, at least for the technology space, is going to be really hard, and probably never, at least not in the foreseeable future, going to go back to that. So we talk about distributed. That's how I think about it. And I think that's where we're heading. I mean, even some of our investors who are finance companies, even they are going back 3 days a week, 4 days a week, maybe. I have not heard of a single one going back 5 days a week. And that's a group that is very in person and very, that's their cult. That is just embedded. Lawyers, like, same thing. So I think that this idea of distributed work, I also just think from a talent pool perspective, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. I think we've all seen it firsthand. You can just get a better talent pool when more diverse talent pool, a better talent pool. It's easier to hire, frankly, in this model. So I think this is the way things are going, but I do think in person, I mean, we see it in our building. These spaces that have all been empty since COVID are now actually being rented very quickly. It's very interesting. Like, you start seeing people are moving to the building again. And they're not moving in so that everyone comes to work every day, but they're moving so that they have a place in New York that their local people can come to. So that's that. In terms of the technologies, I think that are going to get used, I do think there's going to be consolidation in terms of the vendors that you buy the technologies from. But I don't think there's going to be consolidation in terms of the applications themselves, meaning a Salesforce may own Tableau and Slack and Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and blah, whatever the next thing is that they buy. Like, they are going to have that. And Microsoft will have this, and then the other thing that they buy. And then, they bought this company called Ally to do OKRs, and then they bought this company to do. And so is there going to be consolidation under a single brand? Feels like that's happening. It's not going to happen where there's a brand, because there's just too many of these critical mass vendors. Atlassian has a whole set of things. And so there's a lot more of them, but there's going to be some consolidation. I just think that the actual best of breed is just going to continue to live on, because the experience is, when it is perfectly built for a particular use case or industry or whatever, it just is better. I don't think we can go back to a place where everything comes from one vendor in one stack. 50% of it is mediocre, or 80% of it is mediocre, 20% of it is awesome. So therefore you use the 100% and you deal with the mediocre. Why would you do that if better options are out there, and in many cases, better options that are less expensive? But I do feel, especially with the market dynamics that are happening right now and the macro market, it does feel like there's something happening where these huge vendors with huge amounts of cash are going to go out and say, well, we're missing a digital whiteboarding solution. We're missing a task management solution. We're missing and they're going to start filling out these portfolios. But when you actually look, it's pretty disappointing how little these portfolios have been integrated inside those umbrellas. Like, under those umbrellas, they do not get in, my opinion, they do not get integrated well, which is okay, but that's what it feels like, feels like that's where we're heading.
Do you think, like, there's some, like, so I was thinking about things like Peloton and actually Hopin more specifically, that people have overextended a little bit, actually more potentially on the buyer side than on the vendor side, And do you see some kind of contraction coming as part of that?
100%. Has to. I mean, it's just, you can't, some of this stuff, was like 5 years worth of demand merged into like 3 months or 6 months or like, and so it made something like everyone basically staffed and positioned and raised money and valued their company based on the maximum versus the average. And I think that's what, I mean, I love Peloton. I literally love, I have a Peloton. I bought it. I was one of the people who bought it. I had to wait for it and everything. And I bought it and I love it. But they basically built the business during COVID to satisfy this demand that will never happen in the history of the world again in this short period of time. And I think that's what you see with a Hopin. That's what you see with a number, a Miro, right? I mean, you look at a Miro, you look like all of that happened in this crazy window. But in reality, that is just not sustainable because there's not enough companies to keep. I mean, look at Zoom stock, and these are amazing products. But I feel like we saw 5 years of demand happen in a short time, and everyone went to the maximum. And now we're going to come back to what does the real world look like? And people are going to have to, it feels like that's what's going to happen.
Well, we will all certainly be around to watch that happen as we join these solve calls every other week at 2:00. We are very thankful, David, for your thoughts and insight into SaaS, and very thankful to you for being our first CEO on our Ask a SaaS CEO Anything. And thank you everybody else for attending and participating and asking questions. I know it's 3:00 and everybody will start disappearing and all the little black boxes will disappear in our Zoom. So I will click stop now.